The banks of the White River, St. Mary, Jamaica, 1820 or 1821. Two women of African descent, probably enslaved, and a child. They're probably doing laundry, as indicated by the nearby baskets. There's another figure in the water, maybe another woman with more laundry. On the other side of the riverbank, a lone figure next to a bridge with his back turned to the washerwoman. He has a rifle and is facing a road lined with trees to his left. Just two properties to the right of White River is the Decoy Estate. Our ancestor Julius Crosman is a 5-year-old child there. The property is owned by John Crosman. By 1826, John Crosman is dead, and his widow, Maria Jane Campbell, inherits the estate. She eventually marries Edward Pope. By 1839, 1 year after slavery, Julius Crosman is in New Works, marrying Judith Harrison. Eventually, they moved north of New Works into People of Meuse. Meuse has been a plantation as early as 1799. It was owned by Thomas Simon Roach until 1809. Roach had 41 enslaved people in his possession in 1799. That number increased to 90 by 1809. Meuse is also shown on an 1804 map of Jamaica with the name Roaches. Then William Falconer from 1815 with 54 enslaved persons to 1817 with 23 enslaved persons. William Falconer spent more than 20 years in Jamaica before returning to Scotland in 1805. He is the cousin of John Kelly of St. Catherine. Falconer married Christian McIntosh in 1826. While in Jamaica, he was elected to the House of Assembly in 1803. His property was in Berry Hill, previously owned by my ancestor, John Milligan. Falconer's first cousin is John Kelly of St. Catherine. Meuse was then managed by attorneys John Alves, James Seton Lane, and Alexander Gilzine. James Seton Lane's first wife, Kristen, died at age 23. He married Millicent Guy in 1788, daughter of John Hudson Guy, and sister of Sarah Bereef. Today's Meuse is in Guy's Hill. Donald McIntosh and James McIntosh became joint owners from 1819 to 1823 with 48 enslaved persons, then managed by attorneys Alexander McIntosh, Edward Clouston, and James Grant. It is likely that all or a portion of Meuse passed on to James Grant. Jane Grant married Richard Samuel Adolphus Morris in 1884. South and west of Berry Hill is Williamsville. According to James Hakill, who arrived in Jamaica in 1820, Williamsville was once settled by the Needhams in 1740, but was then sold to a Mr. Harvey, who came from Barbados within 3 to 4 years. The principal road across the island from Spanish Town to St. Mary passes through the Williamsville estate. John Milligan, our ancestor, owned 2 properties in St. Mary before his death in 1811, the Rose Hill Plantation and the Berry Hill Estate. Berry Hill is located near present-day Richmond. Rose Hill is located near present-day Bogby or Essex. Before John Milligan became the owner of these two properties, he was the overseer for Williamsfield. The property once briefly owned by the Needhams in the 1740s. It is safe to say that the Needhams and the Milligans have had a long association with each other before my grandparents, Augustus Needham and Eugenie Milligan, ever met. The first Milligan that we know to arrive in Jamaica was Robert Milligan in 1768. Robert Milligan, born in Scotland in 1746, arrived in the island in 1768 and became a trader of enslaved persons. He returned to England in 1779 and died in Middlesex in 1809. It is unclear what his relationship is with our ancestor John Milligan the Elder. DNA results of my mother and granddaughter of Joshua Milligan ties her to the Milligans of the Netherlands, who are of Jewish ancestry. We first see John Milligan the Younger on a muster roll at Up Park Camp in 1814. He has been a soldier for 7 years or less. Also that same year, two possible sisters, Anne and Catherine, described as 3 persons of color, are baptized in St. Mary. We see John being baptized in church on July 6, 1817. He is described as a brown man. The British had several classifications of color. On both extremes are black and white. A person of color is a terminology that is used for anyone in between those two extremes. In 1823, an Eliza Agnes Milligan, a child of color, but the daughter of Henrietta Haylett, a white person, was born. John Milligan the Younger married another Henrietta in 1840, Henrietta Farquharson Clark, in Carroll Hall in 1840. John Milligan the Younger is listed as a watchman on his marriage record. 2 of their children, Felicia and Angelina, were born in Facy, to the right of the Rio Magno. We call it the Big River, in 1850 and 1852. Carolina Isadora in Collingham, closer and still to the right of Big River. A birth record for his daughter Catherine, born around 1840, cannot be located, nor can a birth record for his son Edward. Catherine Milligan's brother, my direct ancestor, Edward Milligan, partnered with Justina Gray. Both were born in the early to mid-1840s. It is safe to say that most of your children were already born before they married on July 18, 1885, in Carron Hall, St. Mary. Edward's occupation is listed as a lawyer, and their residence is listed as Meuse. But Justina's family, the Grays, appear to live in Top Hill, south of Carron Hall. This is where most of the children were born before their marriage, and their son Joseph, born in 1888 after their marriage. A birth record for my direct ancestor, Joshua, born around 1879, cannot be located. On November 7, 1875, Catherine Milligan and Richard Harris started registering their children together. John Milligan Harris was 21 years old when he was registered. His date of birth is listed as May 10, 1854. Louisa, also registered on that same day, was born in 1863, both at Meuse. On the 16th of December, 1870, Sarah Jane Harrison is born to Catherine Milligan in Cheesefield, St. Anne's, close to Linstead. I believe that Richard Harris and his brother, Leonard Harris, arrived in Meuse around 1875. The story is that the two brothers came from St. Anne to Bottom Meuse. My research is that they came from another part of St. Catherine, named Cedar Grove, or Hopewell, St. Thomas in the Vale, owned by Robert William Harris. This is only a hunch going by the names that appear in that family tree. The Richard Harris of St. Anne died in 1817. His reputed son managed the estate for his legitimate siblings. Some records in the 1870s and as late as 1912 pertaining to Leonard and Richard indicated that they're from Bamboo Ridge. But the first registered Harris in Meuse was a John Harris. He married a Felicia Graham in December 1850. Later information indicated that he was a shopkeeper. A John Harris is also listed as a witness to two weddings in 1859, to Samuel Clunas and Elizabeth on August 17th, and James Baptiste Christopher and Angelina Graham on July 6, 1859. Felicia died in 1909. Her grandson, Thomas Tucker, was present at her death. A John Harris is also listed as a witness to the marriage of my ancestor, Rachel Bailey, and her husband, Ernest Villiers, in 1912. This John Harris may be an additional brother to Leonard and Richard Harris, or maybe an uncle. Back to Julius and Judith Crosman, who got married in 1839. They had about 14 children. One of the first was a female born in 1844. The second to last child was Amelia Crosman, born in 1865. Richard Harris and Catherine Milligan were already 25 years together and 4 years married when Amelia Crosman and Leonard Harris had their first child together. Her name was Clementina in 1879. The children followed in a steady succession thereafter. This was not the first relationship for Leonard, who was at least 30 years older than Amelia. He had a child named Joseph in 1872. This child took Leonard's last name. When Amelia's and Leonard's third child, Joseph Uriah, was born in 1881, he had to keep his mother's last name. In 1884, a set of twins was born to the couple, James Cuthbert Harris and Princess Harris. When James Hakewill came to Jamaica in 1820 to paint the great houses, he went to St. Anne, the neighboring parish to the northwest of Meuse. He painted Cardiff Hall, that sat to the west of St. Anne's Bay. South and east of Cardiff Hall, in the interior of the parish, was the Soho plantation owned by the Moncriefs. James Small and his wife Amelia Brown are from Soho. Soho is part of the Monique district, north of Goshen. According to the 1804 maps of James Robertson, Soho sat west of the Rio Novo and east of White River. Amelia's father is listed as William Brown. They may be part of the Hamilton Browns of Greer Park, Penn, owned by a Hamilton Brown in 1817. The family narrative is that Amelia's brother chased her out of St. Anne's because he did not want to split the property after their father died. The records show that Amelia Brown and James Small left Soho, St. Anne, got married in Geisel in 1882, then returned to Soho, where most, except their last two children, including my direct ancestor, Carrie, was born in 1896. Mabel was born in Airmount in 1901. She died in 1902. Irene Matilda Small was born in 1903. Almazine Small, daughter of Amelia Brown and James Small, partnered with Joshua Milligan, son of Justina Gray and Edward Milligan. Leopolda Nathaniel Small was born in 1903. He died in 1905. Robert was then born to Elma and Joshua in 1909. Joshua then partnered with Elma's younger sister, Carrie, and eventually married her. My grandmother, Eugenie, was born in Top Hill in 1911. The Cane River discharges itself into the sea about 7 miles from Kingston on the Windward Road. The road passes through Rockford into Up Park Camp, where John Milligan the Younger was once a soldier. John Milligan died before Charles Alfred Needham was born in Top Mountain around 1879. But Alfred, as he was called by his family, might have heard stories about the one soldier turned watchman, and this might have inspired him to make his own way to Up Park Camp in April 1902. The family story is that Alfred left Top Mountain to take a test for the Army. On the way back, he stopped in Linston, where he fathered a male child. Then he went to Meuse, where he met my great-grandmother, Princess Harris. We don't know why Alfred went to Meuse. Maybe he was visiting with Catherine Milligan. The Needhams and the Milligans were longtime associates after all. Maybe Princess was visiting her uncle, Richard, who was the husband of Catherine Milligan. 10 months later, Alfred's and Princess' first child was born, a light brown girl with a round face. Her name was Miriam. A year later, in March 1904, my grandfather, Theophilus Augustus Needham, was born. They called him Mas. Then Alfred was gone. He went back to Rose Hill and fathered a male child with Elsie White in 1905. His name was Arnold. And an unknown male child in Clarendon. A girl named Elsada in Sandigut, and another girl named Louise in Post Road in 1912. Alfred then went to Top Hill and married Deborah Greer in 1915, a woman that he fathered no children with. A year later, he was dead. My grandfather was only 12 years old when his father died. When he went to Top Hill to see if there was anything his father left to him, Deborah Greer, his wife, told him, "You can come and work the land, but I'm not splitting it." The land remains in the Greer's possession today. Alfred preceded his father, Thomas, in death. Thomas died 1 year later. He was born around 1844. He and his brother, Charles Wilmot, were the sons of a Robert Needham. Robert Needham appeared to have been born in 1829 in St. Thomas in the Vale, today's St. Catherine. It's unsure who his father was, but the same name that show up in the British Needham family tree are repeated in Robert's family tree. The Needhams have been in Jamaica since 1668, when royalists in support of King Charles II, Colonel George Needham, fled Great Britain after losing the war against Oliver Cromwell. George Needham was the third son of Sir Robert Needham of Poole Park, Denbighshire, North Wales, United Kingdom. After Charles II was restored to the crown, the king awarded 710 acres of land from the St. John's area to George Needham. This is today's St. Catherine. He settled in Shenton Bog Walk. George had two younger brothers, William and Robert. William appeared to have traveled with him to Jamaica and settled in St. Mary. George also named one of his sons William, born 1669 and died in 1746. I believe that the Williamsfield estate that James Hakewell painted in 1820 was owned by William Needham before he sold it in 1740 to a Mr. Harvey. Today's main road from Spanish Town to St. Mary runs through the Williamsfield estate. I also believe that we are descendants of this William Needham. The Prospect Estate, now south of Riversdale, is registered in the almanacs from 1811 to 1830 to an Alexander Bailey, although in 1831 and 1832 he is listed as an attorney. It is not known how Alexander Bailey is related to my great-grandmother Rachel Bailey, but on the 24th of March 1912, my relative John Harris, an uncle or brother to Leonard and Richard, and the first documented Harris in Meuse, was a witness to the wedding of Rachel Bailey and Ernest Villiers. My great-grandmother, Rachel Bailey, married Ernest Villiers in Waterford, St. Catherine. She was 29 years old. He was 34. Rachel Bailey's father was John Bailey. He married Virginia Smith in Guy's Hill on the 27th of July, 1892. He was 39, she was 24. One of the witnesses to the wedding was Richard Samuel Adolphus Morris. Richard Morris married Jane Grant on July 31st, 1884. He was a 24-year-old schoolmaster. She was a schoolmistress. Jane's father was Thomas Grant. I believe that Thomas Grant is a relative of James Grant, who managed the Meuse estate in the late 1820s. Rachel Bailey and Ernest Villiers had 6 children together, but by 1917, Ernest disappeared from the picture. Rachel then had 3 children with Thomas White, Una in 1917, Adris, my grandmother, in 1920, and Clement in 1924. Rachel died in 1931. Adris was 11 years old when her mother died. My grandfather, Comas Augustus Needham, was in his 40s when he moved from Bottom Meuse to Top Meuse. He bought land in Furness Lane from his best friend, Ferdinand Morris, son of Richard Morris and Jane Grant. Today, Morris Hill stands on the top of the main road in Guy's Hill. Meuse sits below Morris Hill. The one secondary school, now high school, and the primary school across the ravine were once Grant Morris land. The area was impassable due to numerous trees and other vegetation. My grandfather had to chop his way through to get to his property. My paternal great-grandmother, Rachel Bailey, lived across from what would become the Needham's home. But by the time Comas bought his land around 1947, Rachel was already 14 years deceased. She's buried on the property across from my grandfather's. Another one of Rachel's children, Harold, is also buried on the property.